It was minus 22 degrees at 3 a.m. in the morning, and I was standing alone outside under the perfect blue sky. Whilst clutching the steaming mug of hot chocolate that was keeping my hands warm, I noticed 2 reindeers grazing in the distance. I released my breath and was grateful that they were the only moving objects I could see. To my right, the snow-covered mountains glistened in the sunshine. To my left, the eerie Russian ghost town and former coal mine of Pyramiden stood, but my eyes kept being drawn back to the majestic blue glacier in front of me. I was on my hour-long shift of polar bear watch, whilst the rest of my team slept snugly in their tents. Aware of my responsibility to keep them safe, I kept lookout in all directions for approaching polar bears. There was no sound, just pure silence which made this huge open expanse feel even mightier. I took a deep breath. The air was so cold and dry it burnt my nose and stung my lungs, but I did it again, wanting this dream to be real and to keep myself present in this moment. I was intoxicated by the freezing cold air and spectacular scene. I was standing in a place I'd watched my hero, Sir David Attenborough, talk about so many times in his award-winning documentaries and that I've watched repeatedly. I felt a huge sense of pride having made it here. This wondrous scene in front of me was no longer on a TV screen. I was seeing it with my very own eyes. And in this moment, I had it all to myself. This moment felt even more special because I'd skied 110 miles to get here, pulling a sled that weighed more than me, carrying all the food and equipment I'd needed for this trip. It was the last night of our expedition in Arctic Svalbard, about 1,000 miles south of the North Pole. Tomorrow, a boat would come and pick us up, taking us back to civilization. I'd enjoy my first shower in nearly 3 weeks and could even change my socks, that by now were practically glued to the skin on my feet. I laughed as I scanned the white land behind me, acknowledging the fact that I'd never cross-country skied before this trip. I had only bought my skis 2 days prior to the expedition departing. I'd never camped in the snow before either. The fact that I even got here was frankly ridiculous. In this moment of laughter, and whilst feeling a little overwhelmed, I asked myself the question, how did I get here? For me, that answer is actually quite simple, and I'll come back to that. However, the bigger journey towards actioning change and creating the opportunities that allowed me to be here was not. At the start of my journey, I had been working full-time in a central London hospital as an NHS physiotherapist and very much enjoyed my life. Or so I thought I did. But then I did something without much thought that completely changed everything. For a reason I couldn't give you even today, I had entered a mentorship competition with the idea for my Iron Curtain expedition that I hadn't researched, nor had I done anything like it before. I was surprised and very embarrassed when a month later I got the call to say I'd won. I had changed the course of my life in 450 words on Twitter, a fantasy written lying in bed on my iPhone in the dark an hour before the competition closed. It was utter madness. I remember thinking at the time, what the hell had I done? These people now expect something of me that I can't produce. When I entered the competition, I never actually had any intention of doing the expedition. In the days that followed, I didn't speak to anybody. I barely ate and spent any free time I had researching my idea, trying to figure out what it was I'd actually said I'd do, and if there was a possibility that I could do it. During this time, my mind was flooded with conflicting thoughts and emotions about undertaking the expedition. So to try and make sense of it all, I wrote down a list of the pros and cons on a piece of paper. As perhaps many would predict, the list of pros was far longer than that of the cons, which really was just a list of pathetic excuses. After the initial shock of winning subsided, my excitement grew. I was in awe of the challenge and couldn't read enough about the history of the Iron Curtain or the places I was going to. I'd even wake up in the middle of the night and write down ideas or questions I wanted answering. My excitement grew and began to override my lack of confidence, and I couldn't wait to start. This was my moment. One day in the future, I won't be able to climb snow-covered mountains, walk across countries, or cycle across continents. And I realised that the only thing that was holding me back was me. So I took a career break and cycled through the 15 countries that made up the line of the former Iron Curtain and walked the whole length of Finland from north to south. It took 4.5 months to cover over 3,500 miles. It was the best thing I've ever done, and by far exceeded my expectations of what I thought it could be before I'd begun. I had walked the whole length of the country, followed most days by wild reindeers, and had camped under the northern lights. I'd met the real Father Christmas in his summer home in Lapland. I'd cycled to some of Europe's biggest cities and heard the stories from people who had escaped across the Berlin Wall and who had risked their lives repeatedly to get deportees back from Siberian gulags. I had turned 450 words of fantasy on Twitter into a life-changing experience and had met some truly inspirational people who'd been a part of their country's history along the way. Winning the competition had been a stroke of luck, but I had been the one to create the opportunity by entering with my idea. Had I not done that, I wouldn't be standing here now telling you how I crossed the continent under my own power, or I would not have made it to this moment here in Svalbard. I very nearly didn't enter the competition, as I considered it so silly for me to even contemplate doing such a crazy thing. Winning had been the almighty shove I needed to make me do the things and go to the places I'd always daydreamed about, but had become too complacent to make the effort, nor did I deem myself capable or brave enough to even try. My smile disappeared for a moment as I stood in the snow, reminding myself that it was a miracle that I'd even made it to this moment here in Svalbard after a very serious accident on my Iron Curtain expedition. While cycling in Poland, I had been hit round the back of the head by a speeding lorry's wing mirror and thrown off my bike onto the ground. I sustained a severe concussion, whiplash, fractured coccyx, and some very painful bruising. I was alone, scared, and badly injured in a hospital where nobody spoke my language. I remember during that hour on Polar Bear Watch, as I frequently do, lying in the road waiting for the ambulance to arrive and thinking, this cannot be over. I've got so much still ahead of me, and I'm not done yet. Not once in the weeks I spent alone recovering in Poland did I ever consider giving up, going home, and not finishing the challenge I'd set myself. Once again, I strived for a goal I refused to consider was unachievable. So, after a few weeks of lying in bed recovering, I stubbornly began to walk, pushing my bike across Poland. I started off with small distances and with a lot of analgesia before I could eventually cycle again, but without actually sitting in the saddle because it was still too painful. It was weeks before I could properly cycle again, but to me, any movement forward was progress and took me closer towards achieving my goal. There is no greater perspective in life than seeing it lost or coming close to losing your own. Upon returning from my Iron Curtain expedition, I went back to the job I love as an NHS physiotherapist, treating very sick patients. Some of my greatest inspirations are the patients I treat. Every day, I see them battle through immense pain during their rehab sessions just to be able to meet their goals to sit up or walk again. Every day, I'm reminded of what pain and real physical hard work actually is, and it's never whatever I'm going through. These are the people I think about when I'm struggling, and who I thought about in the weeks after my expedition that give me perspective and drive me forwards. The fact that I even get to work with these people that inspire me so much was another stroke of luck in my life, another ambition that I considered beyond me, but I put myself forward for anyway. I applied for my physiotherapy university course with a begging letter attached to my late application after the post had closed. They gave me an interview that day and I got on the course. Winning the competition kick-started a whole new life for me. I now consider myself very lucky to be able to juggle my passions for physiotherapy, expeditions, and more recently, humanitarian disaster response work. None of which I'd be doing right now had I not created the opportunities for myself, even though I doubted myself at the time. Every day, I now wake up excited about what lies ahead. But it wasn't easy dismantling the sensible life society expected of me and that I'd spent years building to be able to do all of this. I was debt-free, owned my own home, had a regular income, and I gave it all up, except for the things that really mattered. On this journey in my new life, I have learned the less I have, the less I need, but the more freedom I gain. When times are tough, I remind myself of this moment in Svalbard and Polar Bear Watch, and remember how hard I've worked to get here, the exciting opportunities I've created, and what I have yet to come. This very moment is my reminder that when I'm doubting myself, I have nothing to lose, but so much to gain. As I took the last sips of my hot chocolate, I answered my question, how did I get here? This special moment was my reward, gained from all the times when I'd worked hard, created opportunities, put myself out there, and reached beyond what I thought I could achieve. Starting with my late application for the physiotherapy course that gave me the career I love, to entering the mentorship competition and undertaking my Iron Curtain expedition, to not giving up after my accident when I so easily could have done, and to buying the skis that brought me to this very moment. After my hour on watch was over and I got back into my sleeping bag, I couldn't sleep. I lay there wondering, what next? I asked myself, could I now aim higher? I'd urge you to have that conversation with yourself too and see what you can achieve. Because this talk isn't actually about me, it's about you. I've taken you on my journey in the hope that you'll assess where you are in yours. Are you putting yourselves out there? What opportunities are you creating for yourself? You might, however, like to create yours somewhere a little bit warmer and whereby you aren't looking over your shoulder for polar bears every time you have to go to the toilet outside in the snow. Thank you.